He's a very classic type of like super villain, like scientist exposed to thing turned into a monster. It's just like the Lizard.
Yeah. Which would have been the better Amalgam.
Maybe, but I actually ended up really liking this issue when I reread it. I did not really care for it back in the day because it's just like a detective thing with like a weird monster type kind of like floating around. But like rereading it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually like kind of a cool story of a completely misunderstood intelligence that is no longer human in any way that we can conceive of, but like still understands things. And like that's some cool stuff going on there. Welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, J. Mike Folson.
Welcome back, everybody. Glad to have you.
Glad to have everyone back because this is part 2 of our conversation of the Amalgam Comics line. And to continue that conversation, we're joined yet again by Mitch Punpayuk.
Hi.
Hey, Mitch.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so glad to talk about the second part of the Amalgam Comics. I honestly wanted to ask, like, do you like the second run more or the first run more?
I was thinking about that when we realized that we were doing this in 2 parts. And I think that I like the creativity of the first run more. Like I was more hyped about it. But I think the second run is, generally speaking, more technically superior. like the actual writing is better. The references are a little bit more coherent.
How dare you?
But, you know, because you know, I think like it's the Speed Demon problem. Like what I was saying last time, where Speed Demon on paper is the coolest fucking idea. And the image is goddamn awesome in this like 90s kind of way of just being like fire running demon. Okay, cool. But no, like I hated that issue. And like I there's a lot of those like kind of misses, I think, in the first wave. Whereas in the second wave, like there's a lot more deep cut lore. I feel like it's a lot more like Kurt Busiek and like Mark Waid and like just like being like we're just giant nerds for everything comics and like really reveling in that as opposed to like look how gnarly this would be. And as a result, I think you end up with, like I said, like slightly stronger, like finished products, but none of them are ones that I was like quite as like, fuck yeah, this is going to be great as a 12-year-old, you know?
Yeah, I also enjoyed the fact in the second one, I feel like there was more world building in the history of the Amalgam Comics, kind of like, because like you have Iron Lantern, which definitely goes backwards in time, right? As opposed to in the current timeline, like a lot of the stuff in the first one was. Am I thinking that wrong?
How do you mean by that? Just in that
so it's just like Generation Hex takes place during the Wild West, you know, kind of thing, and Iron Lantern seems more like the early 19th or 20th century.
Iron Lantern feels that way, although they do allude to some of the changes in Uatu, the Guardian, and how he appeared in the previous one when he showed up in. Was that in Speed Demon or was that Doctor Strange Fate?
Is it Strange Fate?
Was it?
No, it was Speed Demon. He's the villain right at the start. He shows up. Yeah. And he murders a version of Hal Jordan.
Yeah.
Which anyone who's trying to think that there's like hard continuity and like firm rules, don't. Like you won't be able to look at these books.
No. There are no rules.
No, there are not.
We make the rules here.
But I will say that Iron Lantern definitely feels like classic 60s Iron Man and classic 60s Green Lantern, regardless of everything. I mean, for one thing, Hal Jordan wasn't alive at this point in the regular comics. Like, this was the Kyle Rayner era. And it's around the time, like, this is the thing we were talking about, and I'd have to look at the exact years, how oftentimes this felt like the creative teams, like, warming up for things. And I'm not sure if this is right before Heroes Return or if it was, like, already underway at this point, because here is where we get Kurt Busiek working on Iron Man, effectively, like Iron Man or Iron Lantern here, and then either at the same time or shortly thereafter, he did his run on Iron Man at the same time that he was doing his run on Avengers, and at the same time he was finishing up his run on Thunderbolts.
Oh, okay. So seeing as how this is a year later, was it like the companies decided they just wanted to return to see these projects again, or was there an actual like audience roar for them to go back to this world?
I remember reading in Wizard at the time that there was a lot of like fans who reached out to say like, hey, can you do this one next time? Iron Lantern is the big one for that. Like a lot of fans were like, hey, this seems like a really obvious like matchup. Could you guys do that next time you do Amalgam? So I think there was like good fan feedback, like good like, and then also just it sold well. Like a lot of people really liked it. It was like a really in demand event because all you know. If you're a fan of Marvel or DC, you were like, yeah, I want to check this out. Like, it's the same reason you do a crossover in the first place, where it's like, yeah, if you're a fan of Batman or Superman, you'll buy World's Finest because you want to see them together. And in this case, it's all the same character. And there's that added mystery of like, how are they going to combine all these things? So like everyone wanted to pick it up and just see, and like the barrier to entry is relatively low because each one was just like one issue to pick up, and it's totally standalone. So like, even if you didn't buy every single book because you weren't that hardcore of a nerd, you probably had at least a few that you're interested in.
And do we know if they had already planned to do something a year later, or if it was just because of the fans?
I am not sure. I don't think there was immediately a decision like, oh, we're definitely going to do a second round. But I think they probably had ideas of if it's successful, we could do it.
Okay.
Because like I said, there was like a lot of like fan feedback to like push ones along. So, probably it didn't take very long. As soon as like the initial numbers came in, like the first week of sales, you're like, oh, that did real good. Because again, it's a 5th week event, so
right,
all that stuff dropped at the same time. So they would get the numbers pretty fast, and in fact, they would get the solicitations even faster because all the stores would have bought this up. Because this is the early era of like Diamond totally taking over distribution.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they brought back, was it Super Soldier and Dark Claw for more adventures of those two characters, but then introduced things like Bat Thing and Generation Hex.
Yeah.
So you got to wonder like who came up with what idea, or like why they decided to cross over new characters. Like, are these the characters that you two would have wanted to see like merged together? In
a lot of cases, I mean, like there are certainly characters that I've thought about that would be really cool amalgams outside of this. Like, I always thought that, like, Green Arrow and Iron Man would be a really cool combination.
Really?
Yeah, hear me out. It's like, the character is called Trick Shot. And the whole deal is that, so whatever the accident that strands Iron Man and has the shrapnel, strands him on an island where he has some access to his gear. And so he rigs the arc reactor or whatever type of magnet holding his heart together. But it's a power source that he can plug parts of weapons into to defend himself from whatever sort of, if it's the Viet Cong, if it's the 10 Rings, whatever the hell you're going to go with in terms of the terrorist side of it. I think it all works together really well, where he's like on his own and he's just like got just the thing powering his heart, but also it's his only self-defense method. And then that makes him really good at like adaptable modular weaponry. And then he comes back and he's got the chest plate on and he can then hook up different weapons to it.
Wow. I like it.
And like Oliver Queen and Tony Stark actually have like similar kind of vibes, being like billionaires who like learned their lesson by being cut off and like forced to like get their shit together on their own. Like, I always thought that would be a really good combo. But like Green Arrow is going to be combined with Hawkeye because of course they were
Arrow people. Yeah.
I always thought also that Thor and Flash would be a really good combination
because of the lightning, calling the lightning.
Yeah, and especially like a sentient kind of lightning type entity, like empowering a human avatar. Mm-hmm. So really more of like a Thunderstrike and Flash kind of combo.
See, I always thought like a Thor in the Green Lantern Corps kind of thing would be kind of interesting because there's so many like people that I guess go off of the power of Thor, like with Beta Ray Bill and Thunderstrike and
yeah, there was a Thor Corps in the 90s.
Was there?
Which was, yeah, it was Beta Ray Bill, Eric Masterson, while he was Thor initially, and then later I think they came together again when he was Thunderstrike. And then Dargo Couture, the once and future Thor, from a future timeline where they needed to find Thor to save everything. And then, in fact, he turned out to be worthy to lift the hammer himself, and he could save the world from, I think it was robots. Or alien, future invasion of something.
Alien robots. Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, Thor Corps could work. Yeah, actually, what would be fun with Green Lantern would be the Captain Britain Corps, and then have them all be the Green Knights.
Oh, there you go.
And then you can get like Arthurian legend stuff like tied in there. I always thought that Captain America and Wonder Woman would be a better fit. Like, I get why Superman makes sense, but like you could do like the Amazons sided with the Americans during World War II, and they brought over their technology, and then then Steve Trevor gets exposed to blah 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 blah, and the purple ray to activate it. Exactly. But then, like, even like the Wonder Woman's shield, which is like a Hephaestus forged shield that happens to look very similar to the American iconography, could be like, oh yeah, it's a shield forged from Hephaestus that you get to use to protect yourself, Steve Trevor, and then you could have like an invisible motorcycle or something.
I dig that. I dig that a lot. All right,
invisible motorcycle.
But again, like looking at the 90s, it's like you have to look at like, well, what books were being published at the time, and then what books do the writers actually want to talk about? Because again, like Doom Patrol wasn't like the biggest run that had happened recently at this point was the Grant Morrison run, which is real weird and real off the beaten path from like the eccentric superheroes kind of side of things. I mean, it's that ramped up to 11, you know? It doesn't quite feel like normal superheroes dealing with shit. It feels like, man, look how weird everything is and how far we can push the craziness.
For Doom Patrol?
For Doom Patrol, yeah.
Yeah.
So much so that, like, you know, it like that iteration of Doom Patrol doesn't feel like what you would combine with, like, X-Men. But clearly, like, they had, like, a lot of love for those old school Doom Patrol and for old school Teen Titan stuff and brought that stuff over. But at the same time, we get stuff like in this Generation Hex, where it's like, yeah, Generation X was a currently running book that people could at least allude to and whatnot. Like, no one would do Jono Chamber as a character for, you know, an amalgam if it was just like today being like, all right, well, what popular X-Men characters are you going to combine? Like, most people, when you say Chamber, they're like, who?
Yeah. It's a good thing that the name just worked out that way.
Yeah, that was kind of perfect.
Yeah.
And of course, like, one of the reasons you do the amalgam stuff from a publishing standpoint, aside from just it being popular, is you can pull audiences from the other fandom over this way. Like, you can introduce them to cool combinations here. Like, you know, I wasn't that familiar with Jonah Hex before this, like before this came out. Likewise, I wasn't super familiar with like Man Thing, or like I knew Man Bat, and I knew vaguely that Marvel had a version of Swamp Thing, but like, you know, what wasn't super obvious.
Yeah, I would say that I wasn't familiar with Jonah Hex or Generation X at the time.
I don't think a lot of people know about Jonah Hex. He's a very niche character.
Very.
Yeah. Well, especially at this rate, or at this point in the 90s, because I think he had a big run in the 70s and 80s when they started to relax the comics code, and you could have like a more violent kind of Western character. And Western books had, you know, risen and fallen and risen again, and I think they were on the downswing, because Westerns in general have been kind of on the downswing since like the 80s. Every now and then you'll see like a small revival, but like it's just not this. It's not the fandom that it was in like the 50s and 60s, where like there were just like studios were just cranking out Westerns, and everyone was like into it.
Do you think we'll go to complete side note? Do you think they'll ever try a Jonah Hex movie again?
Another one at this point? No, probably not. They might try like an HBO Max series. I could see them trying something like that, like doing like Tombstone, but also DC.
How did you beat me to that? I was going to say
that. Do you think they used the same actor they used in Legends of Tomorrow for Jonah Hex? I'm going to say no.
They might.
It depends on when they do it. I mean, like I feel like they would have to get that shit together soon if they wanted to tie in actors like that. Because if we're talking like 5 years out or something, I don't know if that would.
Yeah, I don't know if we're back to the whole wanting Westerns again. Like, I think the last big Western I saw was the remake of the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, and like I don't know how much those have really pushed the needle.
Yeah,
you know, like Westerns are very complicated to talk about if you are going to acknowledge the fact that like, hey, it's a little fucked up to just like paint the like people who are living in America first as like the villains in so many stories, or you have to address the Civil War, or you know, like all of it's like kind of fucked up propaganda, and it's you know, as we get, you know, woke, it's difficult to look at and not be like, that's uncomfortable.
All right, I'm done derailing everything. We can go.
I mean, these are all fun books, and we'll have stuff to say about it. I guess we'll say more when we get back to it all. But we've got Bat Thing up first on our list here. And like I was saying, when they first announced it, I was like, wait, it's Man Bat and whom? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, a book that focuses on Man Bat seems very odd. Like, I always see that as like a D-list Batman, like, I guess villain, quote unquote villain.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is in the wake of, like, at this point, the 90s Batman animated series had come out, and On Leather Wings is a great episode. Like,
it is. You're right.
You know, he's recognizable. He's a very classic type of, like, super villain. Like, scientist exposed a thing turned into a monster. It's just like the Lizard.
Yeah. Which would have been the better Amalgam.
Maybe, but I actually ended up really liking this issue when I reread it. I did not really care for it back in the day because it's just like a detective thing with like a weird monster type kind of like floating around. But like rereading it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is actually like kind of a cool story of a completely misunderstood intelligence that is no longer human in any way that we can conceive of, but like still understands things. And like that's some cool stuff going on there.
So is this another one where they did 3? Is it also Swamp Thing, Man Thing, and Man Bat?
There may have been some elements, but like Man Thing and Swamp Thing are so similar that I don't know if I'd be able to identify very clearly all the spots unless we...
Man Thing has that like the like whenever someone has an emotion, he attacks that or something like that, right?
Yeah, anything that fears the Man Thing burns at his touch.
Okay. I mean, if you just make sure you don't fear it, you're okay.
Everything that fears him burns because he touches it.
Seems like a catch.
Yeah, and there's like some chemical reaction stuff going on there. It's I'm like just scanning through to see if there's any like references to like Alec Holland, but like I mean like the character's Kirk. It's like clearly supposed to be Man Bat right there in a lot of ways. Just with like it is really mostly Man Bat with like just a little bit of the weirdness of Man Thing kind of like peppered in there. You know, the weird like like swampy tendrils and vegetative life and all that. I mean, it's cool because like Man Thing has had comics over the years, and like usually they're horror books, which you know plays pretty well with all of this. And like he's usually a misunderstood monster who can't communicate, but has some semblance of intelligence or at least purpose and drive. And I think it like I said, I ultimately really liked this issue when I reread it. I was like, oh yeah, this is. I didn't give it a fair shake when I was a kid because it's like it was a little too weird.
I get that.
A lot of Marvel, but the DC stuff I first got into was like Superboy and Impulse and stuff. You know, this is just very different from that.
It's like a reverse Midas touch.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought it was like kind of cool. There's a detective who's like that fucking bat thing.
Man Bat!
Like here's all the shit, and then it's actually like someone's trying to kill him, and the bat thing's actually trying to save him. I don't know. Like I said, I like ended up just rather liking it. I don't know if did you guys have any other thoughts about it?
I mean, I do end up liking the ending if I remember correctly. With the whole like the detective having to come to realization that he was going after the wrong person, like for the wrong reason. And then this is written by Larry Hama, which is famously G.I. Joe, right?
Yeah, Hama like has. I mean, he's been working in comics for years. Like recently, he's been doing like Wolverine stuff, which I know he did a big run back in the day for Wolverine as well.
Was he more of a Marvel
so he did
person?
A lot of G.I. Joe. You're right.
Yeah.
He also. I was about to say he also wrote Bat Thing. Oh yeah, he wrote Bat Thing, of course. Just checking to see if he ever wrote like Man Thing.
Which makes it makes me wonder if he was more of a Marvel person.
Looks like it. Yeah. Yeah. I see some random Batman books in there, but not huge runs. So yeah, I think he's more a Marvel guy.
But no Man Thing.
No Man Thing.
Once again, like I really would just like to have talked to the editor at the time and be like, well, why Larry Hama for Bat Thing? Like, what did he have a take on this that you just had a story you wanted to sell, or was it more like, hey, can you write a Bat Thing story?
That's a good question. Like, I mean, I know he does like when he does like Wolverine stuff, like he's a big fan of like Patch and like Wolverine like running around Madripoor. So maybe like gritty detective noir kind of stories are just a vibe.
And see, that reminds me of like G.I. Joe stuff like that. Like Patch would be like a G.I. Joe character to me.
That actually, yeah, he would fit very well in the G.I. Joe world.
Yeah.
Wolverine would fit very well in G.I. Joe, actually, now that I think about it.
Wolverine?
It's our Canadian division. God, that's what we're missing. Like, they always like link up G.I. Joe with Transformers, but really they should have linked up G.I. Joe with Alpha Flight.
There you go. That would have been an interesting one.
But speaking of Wolverine, why don't we move on to the next book on this list then, which is Dark Claw Adventures.
Now this is heavily influenced by the animated series because it's drawn in that same style.
Yeah, which is a great idea when you think about it. Like, I think at the time, characters having cartoon adaptations felt like table stakes to me, because like this is the era where like there was the Spider-Man and X-Men cartoons, but there was also like Ultraverse or Ultra Force, pardon me, and like other like attempts at capturing the lightning in the bottle that was like the Batman the Animated Series kind of love. But like looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, well, X-Men is also a super definitive like cartoon of the time. So it makes sense that like in addition to doing Batman and Wolverine together, why not do a comic book spin-off book in that style? And like Batman is the one that had like the really distinct kind of like art style to it, whereas like X-Men kind of didn't. Like it, you know, it was decent quality, but I wouldn't say it was like particularly stylized. It just like kind of looked like it was trying to be like a Jim Lee type look that could be reproduced en masse. And the comics that were like the spinoff had the same kind of like, it just looked like another X-Men book. So it makes sense that they would go with like the Dini-verse style here, which looks great.
Yeah. But I have to say is like, I don't know if I agree with the Ra's al Ghul Apocalypse merging.
I mean, from the standpoint of like their end goals, it makes perfect sense because Ra's al Ghul, especially in the show, they kept trying to emphasize that he wanted to do some kind of societal collapse that would like kill off a large percentage and only the strong would survive, which is exactly Apocalypse right there.
Okay. Yeah.
But it is very silly that when they show him in flashback, he's got the little R on his belt and stuff.
I mean, I guess I couldn't really figure someone else that would be the more appropriate Marvel like counterpoint. Maybe Sebastian Shaw?
Maybe. And this is where we get like kind of colored by like how the characters have evolved over time.
I guess that's true. It's not where they were at in the 90s.
Right. Like Apocalypse is fairly early at this point. Like this is right around the time that we got Age of Apocalypse. Like, you know, they had started to sort of develop like what his actual goals are, but he hadn't had any of like his big like almost succeeded arcs yet. Like he had, you know, the most famous thing he had was like creating like Archangel, I think, at this point, aside from Age of Apocalypse.
Okay. You didn't run up against the wall on this one.
Right. Yeah. And especially because he's in flashback.
Yeah.
You know, and then having Lady Deathstrike be matched up with Talia al Ghul, I thought was like, all right, well, yeah, like there's like some weird sexual chemistry stuff with Wolverine and Deathstrike. That's cool. And then, you know, Talia obviously, and this is well before we get like, you know, Damian Wayne.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, Talia wasn't a character that was created for the animated series, was she?
No. She was part of the original, like, Head of the Demon story arcs.
Okay.
From the 70s.
All right.
It's way before my time. I wouldn't know. Ah.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever read the original Head of the Demon story arcs.
I did back in high school, and it's been a long time. Like, because it was one of the early Batman trades that they put out. So I was like, cool, yeah.
And do you know these writers that were on this one? Writers and artists? Ty Templeton and Rick Burchett?
No. I
They didn't ring any bells for me either.
Yeah. There's some good panels, like the 2-page spread of Darkclaw fighting through the like danger room setup there. That's a great one. And a much better Two-Faced Goblin. Omega Beast, by the way, is a great one. KG Beast combined with Omega Red.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, like this was a pretty good issue. Like it's, I don't know, I don't have like a ton to say. Like, oh, this is at least a nice standalone. Like Wolverine is like wounded, and there's like a good joke at the end with Sparrow still tied up, and like Wolverine's heart healing right there, and like an actual story for Talia. At some point, we're gonna have to talk about the Superman Adventures book that they put out back in the 90s, the one that was actually written by Mark Millar, but it was like all optimistic and hopeful.
Was that a tie-in to the animated series?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's weird to think that these like tie-in books that they were putting out for the animated series were like really high caliber stuff, and like this kind of continues that trend here, even though it's like it's part of the Amalgam event and so forth. But it still feels like, oh yeah, we actually cared about the books that were like very directly people coming from the show were going to pick up first. to try to bring them into like being larger comic readers. They weren't wasting their time. I read some of the Superman adventures back in the day, but the one I really loved is before JLU came out. They had like I forget what it was called, but it was like DC Adventures or something like that, and it would do like different stories about all kinds of characters from across like DC, but in like the Bruce Timm style, and like just really, really fun introduction book for like all the weird lore of DC. If you were a fan of the Diniverse and being like, here's that style that you're used to. Let me explain like Ultra the multi-alien to you. Anyway, so they fight. There's an emotional arc. It's a good issue. I think it's rather nice. Like it's not as 90s edgelord as the first Darklaw issue, and I think that's really good here.
And this one ends with Lady Talia like thinking she killed Darklaw, or does she know that she doesn't actually kill him?
Well, they're still talking at the end, so like. Yeah, like she stabbed him in the heart, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not dead yet. My healing factor makes it like kind of tough to kill me." And she's like, "My beloved."
Yeah, she gives up. She like gets like she's effectively won the fight because all she has to do is like finish him off, but she can't, and she like gives up.
Okay.
And Sparrow is tied up. Spoiler, yeah. A spoiler was around at this point, which I don't think she was yet. Like that. You could have done some interesting combos there.
Oh, wow. So when Tim Drake and Jubilee are interested in each other, spoiler isn't around yet?
She might be in Tim's book, but she hadn't been Robin yet at that point.
Right, she hadn't been Robin. Okay.
I don't know if she'd actually like ever met Batman at that point, or if she was just like a strictly Robin sidekick. I don't know the exact timeline here. Okay. I don't want but she certainly didn't have like the place of prominence that she would later. Anyway, moving on. Now we're actually going to talk about Generation X.
This was I always thought this was a strange book, and then rereading it, like the whole plan that Jono has of like making everybody in the town look like mutants, like I don't know, it just seemed very silly.
It's fucked up.
Yeah.
like these aren't heroes.
No, it's a weird book. But then again, Jonah Hex isn't really a hero.
No.
Yeah.
But I mean, like convincing a town of bigots to like pretend to be mutants so that like Clockwork Sentinels or Steampunk Sentinels will murder them all.
And then he disguises himself to look like not a mutant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which all he does is he like pulls up his like
puts a bandana
over his face. he does the 2020 disguise yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it was fun like having a Trask and like setting up like the like these proto Sentinel characters I thought was cool. I mean I think most of the reason they made this book was just because it was a funny crossover of names. Like Generation X was a book. What if we combine it with Jonah Hex? That'd be so weird, right? I like that the Skin character, Skin Hunter, like with his like weird stomach, like congealed basically his poop and then fired it off as bullets.
So was that Skin and Scalp Hunter? Who was the DC version, I guess?
I'm not sure. Like I don't know the DC Western characters that well.
Yeah, yeah that was another thing that was not hard, but it was just like I don't know who the other counterparts are that are in this. I almost feel like I know that the Amalgam Comics was trying to put you in the illusion that this is an actual ongoing book and stuff like that, but I feel like there should have been just the page of being like, okay, these are the characters that you should know, that are being merged together at the beginning.
Yeah, sort of, but then the other side of it is the fun of being like, oh, I'm the guy who knows, like
fair kind
of approach that like that the type of nerd that I am and that many people are, are the like when a lay person or a person who only knows one side, it's like, well, wait, I know all these X-Men characters. Who are they merged with? And it's like, and someone pushes up their glasses and goes like, well, let me tell you. There is a certain kind of fun to that.
You're absolutely right. There is a fun to that.
But I'm sure there were like either Wizard articles or some kind of supplement. There's got to be something where they're like, oh yeah, it was these were the crossovers.
Generation X, they weren't villains, right? They're an offshoot of the X-Men. They're just like how were they an offshoot of the X-Men?
Okay, so Generation X was a spin-off book that was like the teen team that came out in the 90s for the X-Men. Specifically, there's a couple things going on. So one, when when the Image split occurred and Jim Lee went off and founded Wildstorm Studios, he was starting to put together a team book that was going to be like the second big book that they would do after Wildcats and Stormwatch, being the frontline books of that line. And that was going to be called Gen X. And Marvel was like, fuck no. Like, you're not, like, the most famous X-Men artist at the time is not going to go off and make his own book called something X. So they rushed into production this whole thing called Generation X, and that forced Gen X to become Gen 13. Generation X they did this event called the Phalanx Saga, where they brought back this like techno-organic thing that they had set up in New Mutants and some other spots there. Like there was Cameron Hodge, who was like an X Factor villain, or back when X Factor was like the founding five, and like Archangel had a best friend who convinced the team to go off and pretend that they were hunting down and murdering mutants, but actually they were like quote unquote protecting them. Which was like a terrible idea. And then like when Louise Simonson came on the book, was like, this is a terrible idea. We can't do this. Anyway, so this event happened where it's like this like techno-organic Borg type thing is assimilating mutants and like trying to hunt them down. And so Banshee, Emma Frost, and Sabretooth at the time, although he doesn't stay on for the actual book, like finds all these young mutants that Cerebro had identified and like bring them in. And then once the event is over, and Blink is introduced there, but she dies saving everyone at the end of the event. And Sabretooth is put in like X-Men jail or whatever that's going on at the time. When the event is over, they decide to set up a second Xavier school at what used to be Emma's Massachusetts Hellions Academy. So like this is where she goes from being a villain to being path of being a hero, because she was always more of an educator first. And so they set up there, and it's her, like it's White Queen and Banshee teaching this like new generation of X-Men, which included Jubilee as sort of like the like, oh yeah, no, see, it's still all tied in with the old X-Men. But that's where we got Chamber. That's where we got Sync, who is now currently on the X-Men and is fucking rad. Like, he has the rainbow aura that can match up to anyone else's powers. Nice. So he can he can copy anyone's powers as long as they're kind of in proximity to him. And then you get M, who became a huge character. You get Mondo, who is a hard character to describe because he's mostly just like a laid back, I don't want to fucking do anything because my power is I fuse to Earth, and like I don't like his entire character description is just like, nah, he goes with the flow and he doesn't really want to like participate. And then you get Husk, who rips off she's a Guthrie, like, so she's the younger sister of Cannonball, who was on the New Mutants / X-Force, which is the previous teen team of X-Men. So it was just, here's the 90s teen X-Men group.
So the 80s was New Mutants, 90s is Generation X.
Generation X.
Yeah.
Didn't they get like a cartoon spinoff of that?
They had a TV movie that came out.
Which we watched for
Yeah.
Journey into Mystery. That movie is bad.
It's weird. Yeah, and it's got some original characters that I'm always curious, like, are they ever going to bring Buff back?
Yeah, it's obvious. They were obviously like TV alterations of the version of the characters that are in the book. Like, it's like, why not just stick with the characters that were in the book? Why make them different?
I don't know. I have a headcanon on Buff because there was a character also called Buff who was also blonde and had the same basic powers that showed up in Wonder Man at the time. And that, like, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's intentional. And it almost definitely is not. And I forget what the laser eye guy was, but that was just more like, well, we can't do Chamber. What if we do like a low rent Cyclops?
Yep.
And maybe that was just to be like more like what people recognize with X-Men stuff.
True.
Maybe, I don't know.
And the thing with Chamber is like that the fire that's coming off his face is just psychic fire, right? It's not actual burning fire.
Right.
Okay.
And it's because he's really bad at his powers that it's exploding out that way. Because in Age of Apocalypse, the version that was better, because all the Age of Apocalypse characters are better at using their powers, because it's like, it's the future Trunks situation. Like, it's a shitty timeline, so they've all been like forced to like adapt and get good at stuff. His is actually like a condensed like little like furnace like burning out of his chest, and it looks like there's like some sort of like cybernetic enhancement, but he has his face.
Got it.
But it's just exploding out from him, and because he's like more of like a psychic energy being, he doesn't really need to like do anything to keep them together. But then when the no more mutants thing happened with Scarlet Witch, he was left with no power and a giant hole in his body.
No, jeez.
And so like the immediate issue after is him being like rushed to the emergency room with like the lower part of his mouth gone and like most of his neck and like chest cavity exposed. And they're like, how the fuck are we going to keep him alive? We don't know. And they kept him alive by turning him into a miniature version of Apocalypse. And then everyone decided, I don't like this idea, and just like moved on.
And then the other side is Jonah Hex, which we all kind of said we don't really know much about the character.
Yeah, I've got the big like showcase book for him, and I read it, and it's like, yeah, these are just Western stories, and like it's never been my genre.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know lore. I've read them, and I'm still like, I just never processed it.
And what about Peter Milligan and Adam Polina?
Milligan is a name I recognize, but I could not tell you off the top of my head what. Yeah, so that makes. Oh, okay. Yeah, he does the X-Force series that became Ecstatics with Mike Allred.
Why does that name sound familiar?
Mike Allred. He created Madman.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, he created Azrael.
He did?
Wait,
yeah.
Which Azrael?
Like the
original
the
one,
replacement Batman Azrael. Like
no, that was
in the Wikipedia article. During an editorial meeting, Milligan presented the idea that led to the creation of Azrael, who became the Batman during the Nightfall crossover.
Oh, then
wow,
because it's usually credited to Denny O'Neil and Joe Quesada. They were the ones who worked on it.
Probably, it's one of those like he's getting a credit for like having the initial idea that then got developed into more.
Okay, that's interesting.
I don't know.
Hey, it's more I know about the character I love, so.
Yeah, so that's all I can really say for him. I clearly don't know that. Like he's been working. Like Ecstatics has come back. So like there's still that stuff is still coming.
They're the ones that travel the multiverse, right? Am I thinking?
No, you're thinking Exiles.
Exiles. Okay, yes. Yeah.
No, what was X-Force and then became Ecstatics is more like a celebrity kind of driven superhero concept. Like that's the one where like Princess Di is like kind of sort of tied up in it all.
Wait, what? Yeah. Wait, what? Explain it.
I can't. I'm sorry, I can't yet. I got the omnibus. I actually didn't read it when it came out. I know there was a character that was supposed to be like Princess Di, like resurrected, and then like editorial were like, we can't actually do that, and so
that's probably a good thing. The editorial stepped in and be like, yeah, might want to walk this one back, guys.
People might not be cool with that.
Yeah, that's like those conspiracy theories of people like, oh, Bruce Lee faked his death, and he's like, undercover CIA agent going around stopping things. Is like, you want one of the biggest stars of the 70s to be an undercover agent? How does that work? Like, kind of thing.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't know. I mean, that's the kind of rumor that starts with like Elvis when he like demanded to see President Nixon so that they could do something about the hippie problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Next up is a book that at least makes a bit more sense for why it would happen, which is one of the few actual sequels in this whole run, which is JLX Unleashed, which is picking up with the X-Men characters from before. And we were talking last time about, is there an Ice character or an Iceman character? And yeah, it happens here. I don't know why I just didn't think about it, even though I had read it right before we got into this all. I was like, oh, it's weird that they don't have Iceman. I'm like, oh yeah, because they fucking do.
Also, this is the like second or third time they go to the Fing Fang Foom like character in these Amalgam books, isn't it? Because they do Fing Fang Flame here, but I could have sworn that they have another version of Fing Fang Foom earlier.
Are you thinking of King Lizard?
Maybe.
Which was King Shark, and in Spider-Boy, it was King Shark and the Lizard.
Maybe.
And had been exposed to PIM particles, so it was growing rapidly.
Maybe that's what it was. I could see that.
So this is a fun opportunity, at least, to see a lot of like Marvel character references. We get Dark Firebird, so we get like the Dark Phoenix version of Fire. Mistress Maxima, so we get nods there. This is all the Hellfire characters, kind of, sort of. We get Chaos, like their take on Havoc.
And the book from the last time was just called JLX, right?
Yeah.
And Christopher Priest goes on to do a lot of like X-Men stuff, right?
Priest has done a lot of stuff just in general. So yeah, like he's super famous for his run in the late 90s, early 2000s on Black Panther. He's worked on just tons of books.
What do you think of the Judgment League Avengers to making the JLA work? for both, like combining the two.
As a nickname, I never got the judgment part. Like,
Yeah, I think that's the part that throws me too.
it feels too much like we're fucking cops.
True. Very true.
And I never got why you would have to make that change. Because like the Avengers part, it's like, yeah, we're like Avengers has like this weird element of like we're out for vengeance. Like we're it's reciprocity for like misdeeds, which is like a little bit like no one would actually take this. Like if you just call it yourselves the Avengers, like no one would actually think like, oh, well, you're clearly like driven by rage. But like there is that element of how the language works.
Yeah, it's an odd one. Do you remember it's either late 90s or late 2000s when the Justice League had forgotten that they had formed the Justice League and they all formed their own versions of the Justice League? It was like Justice League Atlantis, Justice League Angels, Justice League Aliens. And like
I kind of remember that event, but I do not remember any of the specifics.
I don't remember what that event was called, but yeah.
Wait, say that one more time.
So it was an event where like all the Justice League members had forgotten that the Justice League had already been formed, but each one of them went and formed their own version. So like Batman came up with the Justice League Arkham, which was like him just taking a whole bunch of his villains out of Arkham and like making them work for him. And Justice League Alien was Superman coming up with a bunch of other aliens that wanted to protect Earth. So it was like him, I want to say Power Girl and Starfire and someone else, but
Martian Manhunter.
Like
maybe.
a heavy hitter team.
Yeah, it was a very heavy hitter team. And then eventually, like, I think eventually they were just like, someone comes up with like, well, wouldn't we just call ourselves Justice League of America? And like Aquaman steps up first and is like, wait, why is it just America? And then I think Batman's like, no, that makes sense. I just don't remember the name of that event was called.
Yeah, I vaguely recall this, but I can't even picture it at the moment. But getting back to JLX, where we pick up with, now it's been a year. Mr. X / John Jones is now crippled so that he's more accurately a Professor Xavier parallel right there. Amazon shows up because most of them have been imprisoned, and like to deal with like Fin Fang Flame, she like frees them all to like go be like look, there's a giant dragon that's on fire attacking everything right now. We kind of have to like deal with this. So like this, finally we bring Amazon into a book because she's not getting her own one this time.
And the whole idea was like, she's like, I have to reconcile with the fact that I'm also a mutant or something like that.
Yeah.
Because yeah, on the regular JLA Judgment League Avengers team, they have a few mutants on the team, but these guys, the JLX, are supposed to be like, no, we're the mutants or something like that. Like we're fighting for mutants. Right.
It's like God, it's like the ones on the team on the JLA still are like the Uncle Toms.
Oh.
Like they can pass, so they're going to be okay.
Yep.
Thing. And this is my problem always when we try to use mutants as like the metaphor for the mutant metaphor. When you have lots of superpowered beings, gets a little like muddy. Like it makes sense to a certain degree, and I've heard people make really compelling points, being like, "Oh no, the fact that we can accept the Fantastic Four means that it's all good in comparison with." Like where we set up, it's like no, that actually is why it's bigotry as opposed to just being legitimate fear of people with superpowers. But like I think there are also limits to that one where it's like, well, what is the fucking difference between your friend who just randomly develops superpowers because like something versus like another person who develops superpowers because they got bitten by a spider,
right?
Or hit by cosmic rays.
It's all mutated genes.
Yeah, like I get more being afraid of aliens in that scenario where it's like, yeah, they might look like a human, but they're like legitimately not from this planet. Like I get being really freaked out by that part, but like, who cares if it's that literally the Greek god of thunder gave you power versus you happen to have the mutant power to control storms? Like which one of those is scarier? I'm not actually sure. But yeah, so we basically get a chance to like shake up the roster. So we get Iceberg. So again, we just fucking forgot. Like we all read this before the last time we recorded, and
right.
We're like, oh, like it's weird that they don't have Ice Maiden / Ice here. Oh, they do, right here, right here. We get Chaos, which is Havoc, and I think a different version of Ray, or maybe I'm mistaken, because like this is the 90s Rays combined with Cyclops for Apollo,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's like the Golden Age Ray for his quote unquote brother.
Oh, okay.
I think I could easily be wrong about that one. I am not sure because it's very clearly Havoc, and he's called Chaos. I'm not positive on the rest. And then we get returning Night Creeper and Runaway for the rogue
Gypsy rogue, yeah.
And we get some cool shots with like Night Creeper teleporting around, putting on his costume to go into the fight. We get Ice Powers fighting with a fire dragon, which is great. And ultimately, we end up with them blowing up this monster, or at least from the insides, and then Apollo, who had been catatonic for most of the issue, being supercharged by this like mystic fire and being this like weird glowing like Omega type mutant that we that we get at the end. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just he's like full on energy being at this point.
Right.
Yeah. So a fairly straightforward like X-Men style story ultimately. Like I think the JL part is really just like, oh yeah, we're going to take some DC stuff to combine with it all, but like I don't know, it feels like an X-Men book here.
Very much so. Yeah. Do you think that the X-Men and the Justice League would ever be able to like work together? Like, does the do you feel like the X-Men and the Avengers work together well?
I think sometimes they do. Like when you emphasize the academic or the sort of separatist nature, like I've made no bones that I'm a big fan of the current Krakoa stuff in X-Men books, and I think that is a good position. Like here's how different the two are, right there. And I've seen eras where it makes a lot of sense, where it's like, oh no, this is a school of like young people learning how to use their superpowers, and like they go on missions, but they're not professional superheroes. Like the Claremont run of like the late 70s, early 80s, most of the X-Men there are like 18 to 24. So it has a different feel than like we're professional heroes. Like Beast graduated from the X-Men and now he's an Avenger now. Those type eras I think work really well. And eras where there's a lot of weird shit happening with mutants because mutants got really popular, and so writers started doing a lot of stuff with them, while simultaneously Avengers were trying to hold down the fort just in general. I'm thinking of, I can picture the cover. It's Wolverine, Captain America, and Black Widow on it, and it was like one of the big arcs that led to the end of Avengers West Coast. Blanking on it at the moment.
Yeah, it's not sounding familiar to me.
But I think they can work. But when the X-Men become more generic superheroes, it starts to feel less like, well, what is the difference here?
Yeah, because I guess that's one thing I always feel like Marvel does well, is the mixing and matching. Like you can see X-Men becoming part of the Avengers, whereas like I couldn't imagine a Doom Patrol character becoming a Justice League teammate. I
mean, you get a little bit of that with like Beast Boy starts as a Doom Patrol member who moves on to Teen Titans, and like there have been timelines where Beast Boy becomes a member of the Justice League. I guess, yeah. I mean, some equivalent, like the Titans Tomorrow story I'm thinking of.
Right. Yeah, I can. Yeah, you're right. That makes sense.
Yeah. But certainly other ones, like do you really imagine like the Negative Man becoming like a JLAer?
Right.
Probably not.
Probably not going to see Robot Man on Titans.
Right. So it's the question of like, well, what are the X-Men more like? If it's, they get paired up with like the Teen Titans a lot because like 80s X-Men and 80s Teen Titans were the two most popular books at the respective lines. So like there is some strong comparisons right there. And so many of the X-Men are like young heroes for the most part. And it kind of makes sense. And then like, yeah, Wolverine eventually makes it on. Beast had his stint. A lot of X-Men have had like periods on the Avengers. Teen Titans depends on the JLA. Like the Avengers, while they have their like founders, like I don't think I've ever had like quite as like, here's our founding seven type like big pantheon, because like who really cares about Giant Man? like love most of those versions to death, but like you can, the Avengers roster usually has a few more like B and C listers on it than like what people want for the Justice League, and whenever Justice League has been like that, usually that's when the book is not doing as well. Yeah,
your Justice League Detroit doesn't usually do as well as the Big Seven.
Justice League Detroit.
So do you want to move on to Lobo the Duck?
Yeah, let's move on to Lobo the Duck, because I don't again, JLX is an X-Men book.
Yeah, it really is. It's just not just an X-Men book, but it feels the most like an X-Men book.
Now, Lobo the Duck. So I didn't know shit about Howard the Duck when this first came out back in the day. But if you read anything about Howard the Duck, it makes so much fucking sense that this is the crossover right here, but it feels so weird if you don't know anything about it.
I mean, I think at this point all I had was the Howard the Duck the movie. I didn't even know that Howard the Duck, when that movie came out, that was a Marvel thing.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen that movie before. I don't think I've actually sat down and watched that before.
Not even part of it?
No, I've seen like clips here and there on stuff on YouTube, but I'm like, it looks weird. So I'm like, you know what? I'm okay. It's like, you know, I think I'm good. But she said I'm not missing much, so now I'm not worried.
Yeah, no one really sees the movie Howard the Duck as the definitive take on the character.
No.
No, so here's why it actually makes a lot of sense. So Howard the Duck, for one thing, was like ferociously popular in the 80s. He actually had his own, like, he had a newspaper strip, which I did not know about until I was like watching like a history of the character.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either.
The books were just generally speaking pretty popular in that it was like kind of like, here's this crass parody of like Disney stuff, which is funny now that you think about Marvel being owned by Disney, because it's like all the duck stuff. It like feels very like Donald Duck, but like kind of fucked up and like he hits on women and so forth. It's the satirical nature of the character living in this weird ass world of like Marvel superheroes and shit, because he like deals with like multiverse stuff because he like hung around the nexus of realities, and that's how he ends up like in our reality, even though he's from a world where they're all ducks. Lobo is also a big satire of like big popular comic trends, and in this case it's more like the grimdark like late 80s early 90s stuff taken to this extreme of violence and vice, and both of them are giant womanizers. And so to take the weird shit from both, which are just like pushed to extremes that like normal comics can't do, and to combine it all here actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you put it, that does make the most sense to put the two together. It makes for a very strange look. Like the duck with one giant arm, one not so big, and then
right, but wrapped up in chains.
Yeah,
a giant spike.
But the storylines do make a good amalgam.
Yeah, I mean, Howard the Duck, I mean, we've seen him obviously in like MCU stuff, but it's more as like an Easter egg type character. Like, it doesn't as easily like scale back to a non-satirical kind of approach. Like Lobo, you can put in a non-goofy kind of book, and either you can make him actually scary, or you can make him like kind of a funny character in the background, but not necessarily breaking the reality of things, versus versions where he's been so annoying when he's died that hell had to kick him out because they're like, we can't fucking deal with this guy. Which is why he's super immortal. Like, not just immortal. Like,
they just don't want him back anymore.
Right. Like, he's worked with Santa Claus in the DC universe.
Yeah, that's true.
But you can rein him back, and then he fits in like the Young Justice cartoon or the Superman animated series, or like, you know, like you can have him be drawn by Jerry Ordway, and it doesn't look that incongruous to like what Lobo's supposed to look like. There are better takes that are like that more cross the line, but like when we get into like the Keith Giffen books, where again, like, it's Lobo's back is back, and like like we're showing off like, you know, like just how satirical and weird we can take Lobo. It's just it's just very different from those two animals right there. But it works more as one character, whereas again, Howard the Duck just like feels so different from everything else Marvel does.
Do you think so? Saying that Howard the Duck being popular in the 80s and 90s, do you think if they were to have done this now, it would have been Lobo and Deadpool?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, this is before Deadpool had that reputation.
Right. Yeah. So it feels like this is, you know, it's the breaking the fourth wall commentary on comic books kind of feel that it would be going on here.
Yeah, this is like circa the like Fabian Nicieza like Deadpool miniseries maybe, where like he's a merc with a mouth, but he's Spider-Man but a murderer, as opposed to like see outside the fourth wall. You could maybe also see like maybe She-Hulk.
Right. Yeah.
But I think the particulars of like I think She-Hulk would work better with like Ambush Bug, and like Lobo would be an interesting combo with like Deadpool, because they're both mercenaries also, and like you could make that all kind of fit.
Right.
But I don't mind it here. I think the book is fun. It's a lot of like sight gags and weird shit going on here. Combining Lobo's dog with the Impossible Man, I think is a great choice, just to have like weird shit happen all the time. And it's like, well, when were we going to use the Impossible Man in this? We got to use the Impossible Man, right? What if he's a dog? Fuck it. Dr. Bongface. Like, it's just a weird, silly book that is like super misogynistic, but like, you know, it's there. Also, fun side note, the Gamora shows up at one point in this one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Definitely a character who is way more popular now than she was then, and so she could be this like random character who one page into her appearances has her top off, and Lobo is like just like cuddling with her.
Yeah. Yeah, she's very much a side, almost background character in this book. as to now, she would, definitely be a forefront.
But I mean, this is a goofy kind of wacky book, and to like, I don't think anything covers that more than at one point when Lobo has to figure out some information, he threatens his own reflection, and his reflection gives in and gives up information.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so it's like definitely if you're looking for like it's fucking itchy and scratchy.
Yeah,
like it's taking like Ren and Stimpy, or rather Tom and Jerry kind of like stuff, or Looney Tunes or whatever kind of cartoon violence, and taking it up to 11, having all the blood and gore, and having like all the things that you would censor for kids actually put in there for adults. So like if you're really into, and that's another thing that we haven't really talked about, which is that like they're trying to appeal to comic fans in general and like allude to stuff, and like funny animal comics used to be a huge thing. So this is a chance to do that in the Amalgam line. The same way that Howard was taking on stuff from like the 50s. Like, you know, Hoppy the Marvel Bunny was a very successful character even after Shazam folded. And the DuckTales, like all the Disney like duck books, like that's where most of the DuckTales lore came from. Like the building out the like Huey, Dewey, and Louie, building out like all the characters that we would see like in later like the larger Duck universe, especially that was going on in the 90s, to, you know, keep on talking about this era. A lot of those originated in the comics. So it certainly makes sense to try to do a funny Duck book, but it's funny that like that Marvel's parody of Disney would eventually become the owners. But why don't we move on to the actual book that we sort of wanted to talk about for this all, which is Super Soldier Man-O-War.
A quick side note about the Lobo thing. I read that in completely the Donald Duck voice.
And that works. Or you could read it in Brad Garrett's voice. All of those work for this character.
Brad Garrett was the voice of Lobo in the animated series, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like any sort of very cartoonish voice could work for it. You could also do like a Robert Paulson or something.
True.
Yeah. Or now I'm thinking like, well, like David Tennant took over as like Uncle Scrooge. Like maybe he could.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Or like a Darkwing Duck type. Any kind of like funny voice actor you could see like do that part and do that part really good justice, because it's just violent Donald Duck. Donald Duck, instead of threatening all the time, actually murders. Moving on. So Super Soldier Man-O-War. So this is an actual World War II story for the character, along the style of like All-Star Squadron or the Invaders, like doing the retro stories for the characters, but being written and drawn by modern teams. So we get to see a young version of the Mariner. We get to see our Whizzer Flash hybrid right there. American Belle, which is a Liberty Belle Miss America hybrid, and then what is this? Batlin Barnes.
Oh, is this supposed to be like a?
It's Bucky Barnes and the cop from all the Superman stuff that works with Maggie Sawyer. Why am I blanking? Turpin. Dan Turpin.
Oh, Dan Turpin.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Presenting him as like having been like a young sidekick to Super Soldier back in the day. We get the Green Flame, so we can sort of set up the crossover with Iron Lantern.
Right. So that's Alan Scott.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Yeah, okay.
Combined with like the Jim Hammond Human Torch.
That's right, yeah.
Or Human Lantern, pardon me. Not.
Human Lantern, yeah.
Again, one of those ones where like the conventions are just like, obviously you would call them like the green, like Green Flame or something like where they're like, we have to combine these names, but they're not, the combined name is not what anyone would ever actually call themselves. He's a man, he's on fire.
Yeah, right.
Like a lantern.
Like
guys.
a lantern.
So Clark Kent, again, who is Super Soldier, heads off to go deal with Nazis on a mission, and he goes off with Jimmy Olsen, gets into some fights. We get Sergeant Rock showing up, which is always fun.
The Howling Commandos.
Yeah,
because in the Amalgam universe, we have both Sergeant Rock and Nick Fury, right? Yeah, because they show them in the Agent of Bruce Wayne, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, they're both still lingering around at that point.
Because it seems like that would be the obvious two to merge together, would be Rock and Fury.
Yeah. Well, and they do from a role standpoint. It's just they establish them as separate
separate characters. Yeah.
Yeah. But the instead of Easy Company, it becomes the Howling Commandos because that's a cooler name. So that's one where it's like interesting to like see characters slotted into roles without necessarily fusing the characters necessarily. But so Super Soldier's on this mission. Like he stops some torpedoes from attacking people. You know, he's doing his job, and we get Baron Zemo trying to steal the kryptonite, and we get the War Wheel. We get a version of Peggy Carter, but it's before Peggy Carter was a character people cared about.
How far back was she introduced? Is she there in the original Captain America books?
I don't think she was in the original Cap books, but she definitely was in the Invaders stuff.
Okay,
because they were setting up her connection with Sharon Carter.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say I didn't think she was in the original Captain America stuff.
Yeah, but love interest in the time of World War II, who needs it? It's only in retrospect where we like start applying that stuff. So she's French and she's a redhead.
Yeah, I was gonna say she's French here.
That's right. That's right.
Which I'm guessing is an allusion. I don't know. I'm wondering if the redhead is either I'm wondering if that's supposed to be a Lana Lang thing.
It's got to be,
but I am not sure. I'm not sure about the fact that she's French. I'm guessing there's something from one of their books, but I don't know which. Unless it's like a really weird like anti-French like Laurie Lemeris type thing,
right?
Where it's like, oh well, instead of being a mermaid, she's a frog. Or something. I don't know. But we get a war wheel, which is always fun to see. These like giant dumb Nazi death trap machines that they would use back in the day in comics. And we get a setup for how Luthor gets a hold of the kryptonite to use in the story arc that we see. What makes him the Green Skull? So it works as a prequel to the first issue of Super Soldier that we got. Like he's very like the last panel is him holding the plans for Ultra Metallo,
right?
And he's got the original rocket. And it's cool.
Now it says on this one that we got Dave Gibbons doing double duty on this, writing and art, but then he also has Mark Waid and Jimmy Palmiotti coming in.
Yeah, so this is probably Gibbons having more control, and then Mark Waid kind of coming in and like, so Palmiotti is inks, Mark Waid is co-plot, and then so Gibbons actually co-plotted and scripted it, and then the pencils.
Okay,
which is cool. I mean, I like Dave Gibbons as an artist a lot. I think that there are certain books where he's really good for it, and I think it's better here than on the first issue. Like his style, I think works really well for like we're going to tell an old World War II type story versus like here's an action-packed modern comic.
Does he often go and do writing and co-plotting, or? Well,
he's credited as a co-plotter for the original Watchmen stuff. I mean, obviously it's like the litigation and all, but he's like Moore is very open about crediting him for lots of the innovations of the book and so forth.
Okay.
And he's just like comics royalty, like again, co-creator of Watchmen.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're absolutely right.
Oh, you want to do a thing? Sure, go do it. But it's a perfectly fine book. Like it's it's good. Like it. This one's more of the Captain America type story. Like the first issue was more of a Superman type book in terms of like, oh yeah, like he's going to go fight a robot against Lex Luthor. This one is like, oh yeah, well yeah, it's back in World War II and he's dealing with Nazis.
I was once again, sorry, going on a side track, but I was having a conversation with Chris Franey, who I used to do the Imagine If podcast with, and I'll ask you this question: is there ever a Clark Kent book where it's like you didn't focus on the Superman heroics that he did, but more of his journalism?
I'm not sure of a book off the top of my head. Recently, we looked at the Superman radio show, where it is a lot more Clark Kent focused, where Superman usually shows up as a MacGuffin to sort of correct a thing, but it's usually Clark Kent investigating and doing all the stuff.
Getting Lois out of trouble.
Yeah, but it's like Clark Kent talks to the police, goes and tries to like find a person. He'll go investigate a criminal and then like get kidnapped, and then he'll break free as Superman. Superman was, like I said, just like a Deus Ex Machina to sort of like right the wrongs of a situation. Right. But Clark Kent was generally doing the investigation.
Yeah, like because. And I know they're making comic books because they want to make something exciting, and it's probably not the most exciting to not see Superman do the Superman stuff. But like, I almost feel like there needs to be that story out there where Clark Kent is just as pivotal to putting away the bad guys as Superman is. Does that sound interesting at all?
I love the idea. There was a meme going around the weekend that we're recording it of like, wouldn't it be funny to do a movie about like the CIA trying to assassinate Clark Kent because he's a good reporter and not being able to figure out why they can't?
That's hilarious.
And I thought, like, that's a great idea. I would love to see that. I'm always here for Clark Kent as a great journalist. I love, like, a dapper man about town Clark Kent who's, like, actually really successful as a journalist. So I'm here for it. And, like, I think any extended Superman run, like like the writer will at some point do like a more Clark Kent kind of focus story at some point. But, you know, obviously once you get into like, oh, he's fighting a big space monster, you end up kind of focusing on the Superman side of things.
Right. Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, why wouldn't you focus on the Superman side of it? He's Superman. I always thought that would, I recently thought that was interesting. It's funny that meme had been coming around too.
Yeah. But like I said, always here for it. This one ends up feeling more like a Captain America book in a way that the first one, like I said, feels more like a Superman book. But it's nice that we get that kind of contrast, because I do think while I might think that Wonder Woman makes more sense to combine with Captain America, I think that they do still make a lot of sense as like very similar archetypal characters. And in this case, it's just, we've got Captain America, and he's not just peak human. He is literally a Superman. All the shit he can do as a result. And that's cool.
Like blow up icebergs.
Yeah. Well, and deal with like the secret identity stuff that never made sense for Steve Rogers, Captain America, but does make sense here for Clark Kent, Super Soldier. You know, like, or at least more so. Like, you know, we've got a character who is like our national secret and so forth. Like, versus like just a really awesome soldier who can like really solve shit. Like, it didn't make sense for Steve Rogers to have a secret identity back in the day. But here it's like, yeah, no, it makes sense. Because like we don't want everyone to know like what's going on with like our ace in the hole. So moving on. I'm going to be honest. The next up is one of my two favorites of this whole run, which is Challengers of the Fantastic.
And you know what? Reading this book back in the day always made me want to read more Challengers of the Unknown. I always wanted Challengers of the Unknown to be a bigger thing. But every time they've restarted the book, I've gotten it, and then I'm like, this isn't interesting. Like there's too much back lore that I don't know.
You know what it is? It's that easy to understand family dynamic that we get from the Fantastic Four side here that I think just makes it like work so much better.
I think you're absolutely right.
Back when he was working on the Fantastic Four, John Byrne had a what if issue where they didn't get their powers. Like the cosmic ray shielding worked. And so they didn't get powers, and they like had a successful flight, and then they just started doing adventures because Mole Man still shows up. And it was fucking awesome because you're like, I'm here for all of this. This is really cool. And Carl Kiesel and Tom Grummett after this do Section Zero, which is a love letter to like Fantastic Four type stuff. I think that Fantastic Four is great. I love it. I hate that no one cares about it anymore as a franchise. I think it's one of the best comics that ever came out. I have the entire, in the black and white reprints, but like I have the entire like Lee and Kirby run.
Wow.
I think it's so fucking cool. I think the basic idea of like, oh yeah, weird shit happened to us. We have superpowers. Let's go exploring is such a like an easy to understand motive for characters that I think that trying to limit them to just being superheroes instead of science heroes is counterproductive. I think it's so cool. And I think combining like the proto Fantastic Four with the Fantastic Four, and we already knew we got that in Spider-Boy, but like having them go on an adventure here is fucking dope. Like I think combining all the weird shit that they wanted to here, like there's all this Kirby stuff going on that's great. Like they've got the four-armed monster from like Kirby's run on Superman here to combine with the Thing, which I is a fun use here, and combining it with the Punisher from the original Galactus arc is great. Having like Reed use the Dr. Octopus harness to like emulate having like stretching abilities is awesome. It's just good. Like it's so fucking fun.
Let me be real here. I don't know if you remember this case, but I think the first time I ever asked you about the Challengers of the Unknown was after I saw Teen Titans go to the movies. Mm-hmm. And I was like, who the heck are these guys? I've never heard them before. And you're like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, like again, like this was my intro to like really kind of understanding who the Challengers of the Unknown were, in the way that the Amalgam books are supposed to be. Like they're supposed to introduce you to stuff you aren't familiar by getting you into the stuff you like. And I was all about learning more about these like weird kind of characters, and like they're fun. They show up right after this. Kiesel and Grummett come back to Superboy at this point, and they have a whole arc where the Challengers of the Unknown deal with with Superboy as they deal with a multiversal adult version of Superboy, Black Zero. So it's fun seeing that kind of shit. I don't fully know. I'm not super familiar with every run that's ever come out. It's usually not been quite as exciting. It's just missing that family dynamic. Like, I think that's the hook that like makes it like really compelling, and it makes the secret sauce work.
The version of the Challengers of the Unknown that came out right after, was it Dark Metal or whatever?
Death Metal.
I don't think it was Death Metal yet. I don't know, whichever
Dark
the
Knight
first
Metal.
one was. Yeah, whatever the first one was.
First one was Dark Knight's Metal.
There you go. Yeah, that I enjoyed it, but it was doing, I think it was doing way too much. Instead of like trying to just simplify it, they decided to try and combine all the different versions of the Challengers of the Unknown up to that point into one. I was just, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, there's a fine line between let's explore how weird everything is and like let's just be weird for the sake of being weird,
right,
and like have too much stuff going on. It's hard to balance.
I also thought that after James Wan's Aquaman did really well. Like he announced that he was gonna do a trench movie, like a movie that was based on just the trench creatures from the Aquaman movie.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
And then they've recently said they weren't going to do it anymore. But I was like, okay, if you're going to do a movie that's just on the trench, this could be the perfect backdoor, like entry for Challengers of the Unknown. You just have this team that goes and like studies these trench monsters. Like what? Because what else is that movie going to be about?
Well, you could also bring in the Sea Devils.
You could bring in the Sea Devils. You could bring in.
That's another thing that we actually haven't mentioned, which is that DC used to have like just all these teams of like humans that were like, that now you're like, well, why? There's so many superheroes. But like the Blackhawks, the Sea Devils, and the Challengers of the Unknown, it's sort of like land, sea, and air, sort of.
I always thought that would have been a great idea, but there's no trench movie coming anymore.
I mean, it was a weird call.
It was. It's very weird. That's why I thought, I was like, this is Challengers of the Unknown. Just bring this in now.
It might not be a movie, but it could be a miniseries. You never know.
It's true. Everything goes to HBO Max. It's
fine. So we get Galactiac, which is a hybrid of Galactus and Brainiac, which as an idea I really like. I think the design's too much Galactus for me.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it was a little bit more Brainiac in design, but you know they've got some parts there. Like he's got this sort of like wire bulb kind of effect that's sort of like the classic Brainiac going on up there. And obviously we've got the skull face, but I could have used just like a little bit more like weird robot kind of stuff. Like I like Brainiac a lot. I think he's an underrated villain. And the idea of combining him with Galactus, where they're both like this like omnipotent alien power who is going to come and do the thing they want to do to Earth, and we really don't have a choice but to let them do it. But these people, they challenge it. I think that's a really good vibe, and I think it's a cool idea that works. You know, I think it works well enough here. Like it's still. I mean, this is like this is the amalgam version of the Galactus saga, or however if you want to call it that, like the original story of all that. So it's very much following the tropes that we're all very familiar with, because that story has been replicated in every adaptation of the Fantastic Four ever, not counting Fanforstic because that died on the vine.
Oof.
Yeah. I love the designs that we have going on here. I love the Thing four-armed monster. I don't remember if it ever actually got a name or if it's just like some sort of. I know that Superman's allergic to him, like literally, like has an allergy to him. But I don't know if it ever actually got a name.
No, comics. I don't think so.
Yeah, cool. We got like I said, we got the Mr. Fantastic with the the Doc Ock harness, which is great. I still don't actually know anything about that clone, the tiny clone of Johnny Storm.
They needed to sacrifice somebody, and the clone.
I mean, that makes sense here. I still just don't get it. I'm sure it's a challenge of the unknown thing that I just don't know shit about. But it's just like, oh yeah. Also, he has a tiny clone, not like a mini me, but like a like an action figure size clone. And it goes on missions. And then we get like the teaser at the end, which is the Dr. Doomsday having taken the power of the Death Racer.
Yeah, that one was weird.
I mean, again, classic imagery right there, because it's, Dr. Doom stealing the Silver Surfer's powers.
Right.
But because it's skis, like it's just so much goofier.
because a surfboard's not goofy. Flying surfboard.
You know, the surfboard. Right. I mean, frankly, the surfboard is less goofy than skis, especially because like some versions make it look more like it's just like some sort of cylinder that the surfer kind of is bonded to.
Right.
Like the Ultimates version, it was almost like a meteor, and then a man like emerged out of it. I don't know. Like, not the point. The point is that someone with the brain of Doctor Doom and the physical body of Doomsday is wielding the power of a combined version of literal death and the power cosmic.
It's a lot of power.
Yeah, it's a really interesting cliffhanger for this issue to end on. And, you know, like, look, Tom Grummett is an amazing artist. I love his look for everything here. And Carl Kiesel's a really solid writer. Like, I think there's no surprise that this is a book that really appealed to me because, like, they're just a great creative team.
Do they often work together?
Yeah, they worked, before this, they were working on the Adventures of Superman book up into and through like the Death and Return of Superman, and then they were doing Superboy, like his solo series in the 90s. They left, they did Section Zero, which I mentioned is already like a tribute to the Fantastic Four, because it's about a bunch of scientists at Area 51 who have like an alien and a bunch of other, you know, it's a lot like BPRD, like the Hellboy stuff,
right?
Which is also like Hellboy. Secret sauce for everyone out there is horror version of Fantastic Four. Like Hellboy is their version of the Thing, and like originally Mike Mignola was going to have it be about a team, and then was like, I really just like the fucking demon guy. Like made that the main book. But that's why he's got the weird hand, because it was a tribute to the Thing's hand.
Oh wow, did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it evolved and changed, but it started off being like it's going to be a team book, and this is going to be my Thing equivalent, and we're going to have all these little things, and then it became focused on that, and then it didn't, and then it became actually about the team again eventually, and had all kinds of its own weird creative weirdness. Instead of super science, magic.
I mean, is there much difference between the two?
Depends. Depends on the writer, because like some writers just like treat science as a form of magic, and others actually like really want to get into the physics and shit, and that different strokes for different folks.
Right.
But yeah, just a really fun issue. I really like this issue in general. Like it's doing Galactus, but it's doing it in a way that's really fun and like alluding to a lot of like weird DC stuff.
Yep.
Next up, we have the exciting X-Patrol. So I've mentioned this before. Brian Hitch is an artist who really benefits from like good colorists, like colorists who know how to work with him. Like nothing Brian Hitch worked on prior to working at Wildstorm on Stormwatch ever looked good to me. And then as soon as he got like the team that was working with him for first the Authority, and then when he went over and did Marvel for Ultimates, like looks amazing. Like, is the artist that defined the MCU. Like, but for whatever reason, anything that came before that stuff, like he did like X-Men Prime, he had like, you know, was popping up in all these other books, never looks good to me. I don't know why. I just can't stand his art with like a slightly older style of coloring. And that's my first part about this, because it's a Brian Hitch art, like art book with Barbara Kiesel as the writer on this one.
Yeah.
And this is a tribute to like the Baron Blood Teen Titans arc. Again, X-Patrol, despite being like a portmanteau of X-Men and Doom Patrol, has a lot of Teen Titans elements going in it. And it is a fun punny name of like Baron Blood combined with the Brood.
Now, this one does a lot in the way of like doing the whole Cable Summers, like different family lines and different timeline stuff, right?
Yeah, so they have a character who they don't identify at first. They just call him Jericho. Again, Teen Titans kind of book.
Right.
And Jericho, of course, is tied in with a lot of Brother Blood stories. It's revealed to be a different time version of Nathan Calder. Or no, Niles Cable, pardon me.
Niles Cable, yeah.
Which actually makes it more like the modern stories that have had young Cable as opposed to like X-Man.
Right.
But he's very clearly supposed to be Nate Gray, X-Man character, who was around at this point. Like clearly, if we're talking about him, this means that this book dropped a little bit after Age of Apocalypse, since that's where he was introduced. And yeah, I don't know. Like, it's fine. It's less weird somehow than trying to explain Nate Gray.
I mean, it just makes me think that they were like, we got to poke fun at that kind of thing, because that's what was going on. Yeah.
It is interesting that they decide to have his like disguise be just the Thing, but gray.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah, that was weird.
And I don't know why. Like, I get the Jericho side of it, but like it's just the Thing.
Which makes me think of what's the character that's the young mutant now, Santos, that kind of looks like a gray version of the Thing.
Yeah, it's Rockslide. I think it's his
Rockslide,
code name.
yeah.
Yeah, so we get some fun allusions to stuff. Oh, also we have got Terra X, which is a fun hybrid of Terra and Terrax the Destroyer, one of Galactus's heralds. Yeah, and his powers are also Earth controlled because all of Galactus's heralds are based on a Grecian element. Because Silver Surfer, despite being silver, is a surfer and thus a water elemental. And there's Fire Lord, there's Gabriel the Airwalker, and then Terrax, and then all the ones after that are kind of in that theme, but those first four are very hardcore that theme.
To go along with the Fantastic Four being elementals themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a couple more allusions to random characters that they never were going to find a space for by way of Dial H for Husk, being able to transform into stuff. So she becomes an Artemis character who's black, which is like good call. It's Artemisty Night.
Artemisty Night, that's right.
Which is just like, yeah, Dial H for Husk is probably the best thing in this whole franchise in general because you can just like throw out as many like weird amalgams as you want.
Who didn't we use yet? Throw it in there. We got it.
Yeah, basically.
We got a space for her.
But yeah, that's about it for what I have to say about this book. Like, it's another one where this one's actually more like Teen Titans of a book, right? Like some X-Men trappings.
Yeah. All right. Iron Lantern.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about Pharaoh Man here. Let's call back.
Do you have anything to say about Pharaoh Lantern?
No, I think it's
what you said last time.
Yeah, it's just a fun callback to Pharaoh Lad.
Yeah, I do love Pharaoh Lad. Like, and again, I didn't know who Pharaoh Lad was when I first read these books with this character because he was only around this time being reintroduced in the Final Night arc or like mini series in DC.
He did get the best send off in the TV show.
Yeah, well, and he got the best send off when he first appeared. But again, like it was the weird element of this character died in like the 70s, and like we're not allowed to like bring him back because like his death is the thing that's important. And so it was only when they did a reboot that they were allowed to bring him back, really, because like he was the Legionnaire who gave his life for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
which also Colossus, right? With the
not yet though, because it was the end of Claremont's like second run on X-Men, which was around 2000 when Colossus dies.
Really?
To cure everyone of the legacy virus.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, because it was distinctly like Claremont came back, the sales weren't that good. Grant Morrison came back. 9/11 happened right when the Genosha like giant catastrophe occurs, and it's like, oh yeah, if that issue had been pushed back a month, it wouldn't have come out.
Wow. Okay.
Weird areas where like time, like how do you remember time? I don't know. Like, what are the big events?
Big events, yeah.
How do you remember directions? I don't know. Where's the Wendy's? Anyway, so Iron Lantern. Yeah, so Hal Jordan's never been my favorite Green Lantern.
Who is your Green Lantern?
So I got into Green Lantern with Kyle Rayner, but I honestly, like, Alan Scott's probably my go-to Green Lantern.
Okay. Kyle's mine.
Yeah, it's between those two. Like, you know.
I mean, you already know who mine is. My man John Stewart here.
Yeah.
And he's great. And like, became way more of a Green Lantern of choice for me once he was on Justice League.
Yeah. I mean, he had to deal with what's her face, Vixen and Hawkgirl at the same time.
Yeah. But at this era, he was mostly known for accidentally wiping out a planet because he was overconfident, and for a brief period being a guardian.
Wow.
Green Lantern Mosaic was an interesting book.
What was that other team that he was a part of? That
the Dark Stars.
Dark Stars, that's right.
Yeah,
right.
Which was the Controller's equivalent to the Green Lantern Corps.
Okay, and then I like how they in this Iron Lantern book how they kind of incorporate everybody that is a Green Lantern, like we know to be a Green Lantern. Like at some point in time, they wore the Iron Lantern armor or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they've got a lot of like vibes going on there. I didn't like how they didn't like my man, Kyle Rayner. Like
Nope,
they made him kind of a dickbag in this.
Make him a good guy in this.
Yeah,
but they tie it back to Human Lantern again with Alan Scott.
We get Pepper Potts being combined with Carol Ferris and Madame Mask being combined with Star Sapphire. I think that works.
Yeah,
fine.
that makes sense.
Yeah, like I said, this is actually a remarkably coherent combination of Silver Age Iron Man and Silver Age Green Lantern. Like, if you only knew Green Lantern from like the Ryan Reynolds movie, you're like, oh yeah, I see how this all works. And if you only knew Green Lantern from like a couple random comics from the 60s, you're like, I see how this all works. If you only knew Iron Man from the 90s cartoon, from the old like 70s or 80s cartoons that had come out, if you only knew him from reading a couple random issues back in the day and then like saw him in Avengers, all of this like fits. It's all very classic set tropes. Only confusion I have here is there appears to be a Killer Croc, or not Killer Croc, pardon me, King Shark, showing up a second time. And this time combined with, is it Ultima? I'm blanking on the giant robot Iron Man foe. I was about to say Ultron. It's not. Ultimo, maybe?
Ultimo?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's very similar. And you're like, why have all the robots have like the UL prefix? And really cool use of like the Green Lantern ring to like make yourself giant by having like this like layered armor on top of like light construct armor on top of light construct armor to make yourself be able to participate in a kaiju fight in space.
And changing the color scheme of Iron Man armor to like green and yellow as opposed to red and yellow, I kind of dig it.
Looks pretty good. Like you can easily picture an updated version of that. Like it works really well in general.
Yeah.
And then at the end we get Mandarin Esto, who mostly is. It's interesting for all the Mandarin ring or all the Green Lantern rings, which at this point, like we've had the Hal goes evil and steals all the rings from people cover that happened right before he became Parallax. So there is that kind of vibe, but I'm also curious. Like that's interesting. Like a lot of Green Lantern rings there. I'm not sure if they add to power that way or if it's just like here's all the Green Lanterns I've killed.
I wonder if you were to redo this now, if you could do like a Armor War and like War of Light like combined storyline.
Yeah, like the different cores.
Yeah,
certainly with like the Mandarin side of it, if he had one of each ring, would be really cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah, because like a lot of adaptations of the Mandarin have moved away from him having like each ring having its own unique, distinct power, and I think that's so cool. Like,
yeah.
This ring specifically is ice beams. This ring specifically is fire. And I always like that. I like when you have like just enough of a niche that it forces creativity. Yeah. Where it's like my right hand is trapped, but my left hand is free, and I can only have these 5 rings, or something to that effect. But yeah, it's like I said, it's a really solid Silver Age throwback. Then we get the Magnetic Men featuring Magneto.
So once again, like the idea to continue this particular storyline from the first one, like I don't remember the first one, the Magneto and his Magnetic Men like book being all that great. The fact that they want to continue with the Magnetic Men featuring Magneto.
I have a theory for why you would do it, which is that the robots that they fight are all such wonderful niche like comic book references that I feel like you'd almost just do it for that.
Okay.
Because each one of them is so in the arc, the Magnetic Men are like rebuilt after some damage being like, you're all sentient and I can't risk you getting hurt. So here's counter lives and like lots of deep cut lore to parse through there. But then they all get ambushed by all these other robots, which are all based on, in addition to being based on characters, each one of them is built off of like a specific fake metal from one of the companies. And I think that part is really fun because then you've got like your Claw one being built out of vibranium, and you've got your like Vance Cosmic being built out of Interton, which is like a Legion of Superhero metal. And like your Vulture / Hawkman one is built off of Ninth Metal or Nth Metal. That's all cool. That's all the same shit that is the Dark Knight's metal stuff.
True.
Where it's like so like that's all like good ideas. I hate the redesigns of all the metal men here. They all look so much worse than the first issue. Specifically like Nickel. But yeah, I mean like it's mostly just like here's the fun of that. And then we got Chemo and Arnim Zola. Yeah, showing up here. Combined with Quasimodo and Computo. Yeah, anyway, it's like kind of whatever. At the very end, all the robots team up with them, but that's the only reason I can think of it. Where it's just like, oh yeah, wouldn't it have been more fun if instead of just like racking your brain to come up with more than the 3 actually existing magnetic metals, which is a fun idea from the starting point, but there's only 3 actual metals that are magnetic. Wouldn't it be fun to like use all these fake metals from throughout continuity and tell a non-story?
Yeah, because it's very much a non-story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like Tom Peyer, we talked about him a bit when we talked about the Superman 2000 pitch, because he was the 4th person on that group, along with Morrison, Millar, and Wade. Mm-hmm. And like he does good stories, but issue just isn't much of something. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess the other part is like this is the era of like Magneto. You know, they did Age of Apocalypse where Magneto was a hero. Joseph was a character right then. So like maybe they wanted to like do more Magneto stuff because Magneto was popular and like becoming a hero in the books. I mean, like the combos are cool.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It was an easiest way to get more out there using these characters. You had such a wide array of characters to use.
Yeah,
I just didn't think the first book was all that interesting. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah. It looks cool.
True.
It's a cool concept. Like, it's.
I think the idea of splitting the two, like the Will Magnus and the Magneto character Eric Magnus, I guess, yeah, was a cool idea.
Yeah, that was a really cool background idea that they never, Will Magnus being the villain in the first JLX book was interesting, and at the same time we were getting it there, and we talked about how there's like some weirdness with the writer for the original. So, maybe they just wanted like some redemption on that arc and then move on with their lives. But yeah, it's just not a particularly exciting one. And like while the first issue had like very 90s art, it was like 90s art that was at least like cartoonishly appealing, and this one like is kind of like less interesting to me.
Yeah.
Moving on. Spider-Boy team up. This is my other one that I really love.
Oh, this is a great book.
Yeah, this was super fucking cool. So for starters, I love, like the first one had Mike Wieringo as the artist on this one. And this one has R.K. Sterncel, who has a very different style. But I love this like weird kind of Kirby-esque kind of anime look that he does. It's so fucking cool. I love Scavulture, which is the scavenger and vulture hybrid here. Fucking fun stuff. Legion of Superheroes, guys. This is the Legion of Superheroes book finally that they're doing. And like, God damn, finally. I mean, where to even start?
I do love that the Superboy, Spider-Boy, like takes more of the Peter Parker being smart, like focus, I guess. Characteristics. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. I mean, they play that up more, which is good. And they play that up more. I wonder. So behind the scenes, when they did the first one, like Spider-Boy is Ben Reilly and Con-El, but they have elements of like the Clark Kent Superboy and like classic Spider-Man Peter Parker stuff. But by this point, like Peter Parker was back to being Spider-Man. So I wonder if there was like a little bit of an attempt to like make him a little bit more Peter Parker-ish and like emphasize kind of the science side.
I would assume it'd have to be.
And Legion of Superhero stuff, oftentimes Superboy had a lot of super science. He had, super robots and super other things. Uh-huh. Like, he had a super lab. I like that there is a tie-in to the Challengers of the Fantastic bit here with the Death Racer showing up. Or Silver Racer, pardon me. And we get, like, all these iterations of the Legion of Galactic Guardians, which, for people who are not familiar, prior to the 2000s, the Guardians of the Galaxy was a future super team. Like they were superheroes in the far future, in the 30th century. And in their case, Earth had been taken over by the Badoon, which was like a lizard race of alien space conquerors. And they were like freedom fighters in this era, including Vance Astro, who was an astronaut frozen in time, or like in cryogenic suspense on his way to Alpha Centauri. And when he arrives there, we'd already figured out faster than light space travel. So like he was like, oh shit, my entire life was a waste. But he gets the shield of Captain America and becomes the leader of this whole team, each of them from different colony worlds of humans that had been genetically modified to survive on their worlds. So like Pluto was designed with people who could control their temperature really well because like it's so cold, but like they needed to be able to both adapt for cold, but also like generate heat for things. And like the Charlie 27 is from like Jupiter and is like designed for super high gravity. So that was Guardians of the Galaxy. And Legion of Superheroes, we spent like 2 months talking about on the show.
So was Guardians of the Galaxy then just like a more direct answer for Marvel to Legions of Superheroes then?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, the structure is a little different because it's freedom fighters in a, the world has been taken over. Although eventually they do win and like they're the super team of that era versus the Legion is like more of a utopian type future, but they're both like, here's the future team. And they would both come back in time and deal with stuff. And like in Guardians of the Galaxy, there's all this like Captain America lore because the shield is like a thing that survives into the future and whatnot. And Vance Astro, who is like the leader of the team, when they come back in time, meets his younger self, who hadn't gone off to be an astronaut yet. And that character realizes that he would eventually develop mutant powers and becomes a superhero instead of an astronaut. And that becomes the character known as first as Marvel Boy and then Justice.
Justice, yeah. I always knew him as Justice.
And he's a founder of the New Warriors. So there is actually like even a Superboy kind of element going on there, but it's like very weird and indirect. Anyway, so we got our first roll call.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We have 3 different roll calls in this.
Yeah. And there's so many fun ones here. I love Living Lightning Lad.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like a bunch of great ones. Timberwolf by Night, Paste Eater Pete.
Instead of
Paste Pot Pete.
Paste Pot Pete,
yeah. Matter
Eater, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the character that Michael Rosenbaum does in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 Part 2? That it's the Crystal guy.
Oh yeah, that's Martinex. And so in this, it's combined with Brainiac 5 to be Martinex 5.
Martinex 5. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
that's it.
I mean, there's so many fucking cool ones. We don't have time to go through every single one because again, there's 3 roll calls. But so Spider-Boy is almost killed by the Skev Vulture. Like he gets shot at and time freezes and he's brought into the future so that he can like explain a thing to these people in the future before time breaks down and so he can be sent back to die. So this whole issue, he's just like every time he comes back to his time. Like he's, literally a second away from dying, and shit goes wrong because they fuck up. Like their version of the Fatal 5 show up, screws up everything, and like he can't be out of time for too long, or he breaks reality. And so he does. And at first, it looks like he's going to split into Spider-Man and Superboy.
yeah, that's right.
And then he gets pulled through 5 years later, so we get the 5-year Gap Legion stuff. Which I don't know if you guys noticed this one. Like once he goes into that time, they're doing the 9-panel grid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is an illusion. Like the Giffen infamously in when he did the 5-year Gap Legion, like really did the Watchmen style 9-panel grid, like was like slavishly. So we get that illusion there. It's this grim dark future. 5-year Gap is like Earth is shit. Everyone's in these like grungy late 80s like outfits. Everything's terrible. And then he gets sent through time again, but now he's in the reboot era, and he's like, oh no, I know how this goes. Except like everything's different now.
And then we get the tie-in with Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
making him Mon-El and Miguel, like I thought that was great.
Yeah, Meg L. O'Hara.
Uh-huh.
That's a fun combo right there. We get, the Legion shows up in the past, and it's like all fun. I like the Legion ring, the anti-gravity ring. So Guardians of the Galaxy, I believe, had anti-gravity belts that they could use, and like the design with this like sort of American kind of icon to it, like to the star, is a reference to the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff that they had. So it's like really well integrated, like iconography for everything. So I just like. The art is super detailed here. Like it's like way to in excess of what you would expect. Like every circuit is illustrated. Everything is drawn like way out. And I fucking said the wrong name before because I was looking at the credits. It's Ledron is the penciler. R.K. Sternzel is the writer on it. So
well, it's the amalgam of Roger Stern and Carl Kessler.
Yeah, I think so. But either way, I said the wrong thing before. The whole thing, I just love this issue. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. Everything about it's great.
I have to assume like it's more of a Legion story than it is. So a Superboy Legion story than it is Spider-Man story. But with the whole like Mon-El going trapped in the Phantom Zone till he gets cured of his lead poisoning by Brainiac 5, right?
Yeah, it definitely feels like at this time, this is more Legion of Superheroes. Although now with more Spider-Verse stuff, like Spider-Man has started to feel more like this in some ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. The pinup at the end is fucking gorgeous.
It is,
by the way, of him like sitting on a neon sign, and you can see all the tubes for the neon. Yeah, but it's definitely like more Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes throughout this whole thing, and I'm fine with that. I love it all.
You mean part of the creator for Men of Steel is fine with the Superboy Legion of Superheroes part of the story?
Right. Like I love Spider-Man stuff, but like man, like this, like, and I love Spider-Man 2099 is the other thing. So like I'm happy to do like allusions to all that. So great, it's great. I'm happy with it all. Like I said, you can tell like the two that are my favorite. I have like a lot to say. And then last up, we've got Thorian of the New Asgods.
So I know I don't know how you two feel about it, but I've never been a fan of John Romita Jr. art. So like this book has always been like I don't want to read it.
Okay.
So I don't even remember what happens in this book.
You know, not a lot, frankly. Like, it's a love letter to like Kirby stuff, but it's mostly like, oh, Lok Desaad is going to unleash like terribleness, and like Thorion goes to face it and turns into a celestial at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the one which really like clicked the whole, like, this is like test runs for teams working on other books. Because like I said, Howard Porter on like JLX would then go on to do JLA. But like, this is the one where it was like the next year they announced the new Thor book following Heroes Reborn, or like the Heroes Return. Because like they came back and like I said, there was like, you know, they had like the Kurt Busiek, George Perez Avengers run. They, you know, like had like all these relaunches. Like Wade and Garney did their like picked up the Captain America book and whatnot. But Thor didn't come back at first, and it was like another year before the Dan Jurgens, John Romita Jr. Thor run. So I feel like that's being like, hey, can you draw like Thor shit? Was like the question here. And it was like, yeah, I can do that. And like most of the book is just like an excuse to like draw like a lot of like Jack Kirby stuff, but in John Romita style. I think this is the type of book Romita should be working on, though, because like I like Romita the most when he's doing like big barbarian type characters, like when he's doing Thor. I don't really like Romita on Spider-Man.
Yeah, I never liked him.
Which sounds like blasphemy, but it's because his dad was a famous Spider-Man artist.
But
you know?
they
like,
obviously have two different like styles of art.
Yeah, way different. Like compare the Romitas to the Kuberts. Like Joe Kubert versus Andy and Adam and Andy Kubert, like their styles look way more consistent with each other, and especially between Adam and Andy. But like the Romitas look so different. I don't know. Like Romita, like I said, like I want him to have like big dumb space shit to draw. Big dumb space shit with axes, like, is perfect. Like him working like when like Hercules and Thor and the Destroyer are fighting the dark gods looks fucking dope.
I do have to say his Hercules I do enjoy. I do like the way his Hercules looks.
And so it looks fine here for the most part. Like I think the design for Thorion looks good enough, but it's kind of weird to take like Jack Kirby's like weird pseudo sci-fi take on gods and combine it with Jack Kirby's like pseudo sci-fi take on actual gods. Or actual mythology, and then try to combine it into a way like, you know, because like the new gods were already based on actual mythology, but just like on like more of a metaphoric level versus like, or an abstracted degree of it all, versus his like Thor stuff, like was like, all right, we're going to take gods, but we're going to like, you know, strip the Wagnerian and like the ritual and so forth, and we're just going to make them ancient aliens, and like how those all weirdly mesh together here, where then we're combining that, like it makes sense, but only so much. I don't know if that makes sense. I feel like the New Gods and the Eternals would have been a better fit for what they were trying to do, because all we're doing here is we're taking Norse mythology and making it slightly weird.
Right.
But that's about all. Yeah, not a lot happens. It's at the very end. It's like, oh yeah, he faced off against this terrible force and prevented these Prometheans from being freed and became a guardian of the source. Like,
yeah, we see the source wall in this, right? Like, kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, he's just standing there with his little axe in hand.
Again, it's a lot of cool visuals. It's just there's not a lot of story in this one.
So then, do you think that this second run of the Amalgam just didn't do well enough that they didn't come back for a third run?
Yeah, it's weird that they did do another Access miniseries. Like, so there's Access, and then there's All Access,
and then Access Unlimited.
Yeah.
Or was it All Access and then Access on? I forget.
It's one of the two.
Because they did do the Access miniseries the following year, and I was like, oh, cool, we'll get more Amalgam stuff. And, you know, they had some cool ideas in the actual comic, but they didn't do actual Amalgam books.
Right.
Which is interesting. It's also interesting that they didn't just, like, throw up their hands and say, like, let's just do all new shit. And I'm glad that they didn't from the standpoint of Spider-Boy Team-Up and Challengers of the Fantastic. I think those are great books that built off of what was done the first time. Dark Claw Adventures, I think, is a great idea, building off the first time. Fuck it, sure, Super Soldier, sure, more of that. That's fine. But it is weird that they didn't stop to be like, oh, what else could we do that's new and different from the previous stuff?
Right.
And it would, you know, and the next wave, it would have been, I would have been fine with like all new Amalgam stuff, like do Captain America Jr.
Yeah.
Do that Iceman Green Lantern hybrid.
There's I mean, would the two of you like to see something like this again? Because I know that you're both active on Twitter, and you've probably seen that. Was it Cal Husset who's been championing more?
Oh yeah, I've been seeing like Amalgam. I think is such a fun idea that people just gravitate towards because it's so easy to explain. Where it's like it's these two characters mashed together. Like,
right. And who doesn't like to just do that?
Obviously, I'm all for more of this. I would love a 2023 Amalgam event. Like if DC and Marvel could get their shit together.
That would be so much fun.
Don't think it will ever happen again.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, never say never, but probably never.
Because because you could even imagine like doing it where like they really dwelled on the weird multiversal nods and like really built off of that. Like maybe an assemblers / like Squadron Supreme team up that leads into an event that has like amalgams. Like could be fun. Because
didn't they? I know they didn't directly show it, but like they allude to it in Doomsday Clock. Like when they at the end of it when they talked about the metaverse and all that stuff. Like wasn't there an amalgam character kind of in the background or in shadow or something like that?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean it's still on everybody's mind. I think, and I think you're right. It's just because everybody loves to shove two characters together.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, like
that's how we got Dark Claw.
Of course, I want more of this. It's so fucking fun. As long as it's not the norm. Yeah, and it's been like 25 years. Like it's time for another one.
No, exactly. I mean, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't they try and work something out for their 25th anniversary, or I guess now 30th anniversary?
Yeah, that'd be really cool. But I don't know if it would ever happen. But I would obviously I'd be happy for it. Like the books have gone in such weird directions over time. Like Avengers matter in a way that they didn't here. You know, like we were talking last time. It's like, you know, like Captain Marvel, like Carol Danvers is a totally different character than whatever was going on at the time. Like Binary was a character that no one talked about because unless you were like really deep into like X-Men and specifically space X-Men lore, like there's so many things you could do now, and you could make allusion. Like, can you imagine like a parody of the Snyder Cut combined with Endgame?
Oh wow, wow,
that would be awesome.
I mean, yeah, especially like multimedia, like because it would be really cool, and everyone would pay to see it, but then they'd have to decide who gets the money.
Yep,
God, that would be the worst.
Yeah, and you could imagine like a Miles Morales, John Kent amalgam right there.
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Yeah, lots of fun stuff you could do with it, but probably won't.
No,
but yeah, I'd be here for
hopes up just to dash him on the rocks.
Yeah, and like I'm trying to think like, okay, so with like Krakoa era X-Men, what would you do with that with DC? And like,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, now I'm like, that is actually like kind of rough. Unless you did it like you kept it with like Doom Patrol, but it was now more like a leper colony. Yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be fun to build on. I would love to see all that. And I'm like, artists and writers could come up with really creative stuff. And sometimes that would be from the restrictions of like, okay, this character's already called, but we have these other characters and see what people could come up with. Would all be a lot of fun. And like we said, you know, like Ambush Bug could be used. Deadpool could be used. You could get some real meta stuff going on there. You could have a lot of fun with that all. Yeah,
like I wonder if you would go back to the. I mean, obviously the iconic one of the. As you said in the last recording we did, you know, Darkclaw being a very noticeable one or one that people remember, iconic. But wouldn't you? I feel like it'd be Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark merging together this time. You know, Iron Man, Batman, just because of the popularity of those characters.
Yeah, probably. Or do like Steve Rogers with Batman this time to kind of play it up in a weird way.
That'd be cool.
Or you combine the Bruces, like you have like a raging bat monster kind of thing.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me come on to talk about this again.
Thanks for coming back. It was a lot of fun to revisit these books. Like, again, it's been 25 years.
To read these books for me. You know, I don't even remember how old I was, but I was young when these came out.
Yeah, J-Mike, of these, top 3 books, what for the whole Amalgam run? Like, we're not just wave 2.
I really like Spider-Boy because that was actually a lot of fun. Both iterations. Darkclaw, just because. And which one had the Doctor Strange Fate?
Doctor Strange Fate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one was that one? I don't remember which one that was.
It was just Doctor Strange Fate.
Well, there you go. I love Doctor Fate. And I was like, holy crap, he amalgamated with like Doctor Strange and Charles Xavier. This is too powerful.
It's too much, man. You took too much. Oh, that's how you would do it. You do magic instead of mutants. Because they have like Homo Magi in like DC stuff, where
right.
like humans who are innately magical.
Okay.
And then you make all the X-Men stuff like magic. And then it could be Avalon, which is already X-Men stuff anyway. So it combines really well there.
Yep.
Oh shit. Okay. Mitch, what top 3?
I think again, you're gonna go with Super Soldier. Definitely Spider Boy. And I think I had a lot of fun with that Iron Lantern book. I think that was a fun book.
So for a top 3, this is going to be like kind of lame because it's going to be for me. It's Spider Boy team up, and Challengers of the Fantastic.
How dare you?
And then like the close runner up is like Darklaw Adventures, which is different than where it was when I was younger. Because like I liked it fine, but like I was more there for like the edgy look of like the first issue of Darklaw. But rereading it, I'm like, oh no, this is a great issue. So yeah, but the Spider-Boy books, those two are just like easily the standouts for me. I fucking love them. Like, I think they're fucking great. Challengers of the Fantastic Ross is just a lot of fun.
I mean, I definitely have to say that the design of Darklaw is so great. Like just the look of the character. I think when rereading that Legends of the Darklaw book, I didn't get the whole. I didn't get as much from it as I thought I did the first time around, or maybe I just did the first time around and this time it didn't hit me as much. But the Adventures of Darklaw book was much better.
Well, and it's a full story,
right?
Like
exactly.
Instead of like a fake like cliffhanger at the end. Yeah, like Darklaw Adventures and Lobo the Duck are also like close up there for me. And honestly, that puts 4 of them higher up on the list than anything else besides Spider-Boy from the original run. And I like that original run. It's just none, like more of those are like the idea is cool and the art's cool. And a lot of them have like fake cliffhangers that like kind of mean that the story doesn't have a resolution. So it's like, here's a fun premise. And that's about it. But yeah, I'm just so lame because the Spider-Boy is so good. Like the Spider-Boy costume's so good. The art in both books are great. Like the story in general is fucking awesome. I just goddamn love it. And like I said, Challenge of the Fantastic's so good. Even if it's just doing the beats of the Galactus saga, it's like the Galactus story is a really good one. Yeah, that's where I'm at. I wish looking back that I had more to say about Super Soldier because like it's a good idea, but neither issue has like a lot going on in it. It's just like it's unfortunately the problem of like the like Superman comes and saves the day type situations.
It's the thing you're battling against with your podcast here.
Yeah. Which is rough. And you would think it wouldn't be as much, but and they have good reasons for him to have threats. Like the first Super Soldier feels like the robot fight Max Fleischer cartoon. But you know, like he's getting weak and he's fighting and it's a struggle, but it's just it doesn't feel like there's as much going on as some of these other books. Like that first Spider-Boy book has so much shit in it, and then the Legion of Superhero tie-in is so much shit in it. There's so much stuff for you to look at and to take in and to like appreciate and like. And he's getting married to Mary Jane. but I stand by my take that I think that technically speaking, the second round is better. The first round has more energy. And that's sort of like so I don't begrudge anyone preferring the first round, and the second round like doesn't have quite the same like vigor because it just happened. It's round 2, but it has, like I said, like I think better across the board writing and actual like appreciation of the larger lore and like more deep cut references.
Okay.
Fun to revisit. Like, definitely if you can track these down, track them down. They're a lot of fun, especially the Spider-Boy books, in my opinion. But all of these are really strong contenders. And, you know, even the worst of them are at least, like, interesting to look at. Like I said, like, Speed Demon is my least favorite of this whole group. And the cover is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, check that shit out.
I love that.
Like, they're all fun. Like, Doctor Doom is combined with Doomsday. That can't go wrong. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun. I really appreciate looking back at this. And Mitch, thank you for coming back on.
Thank you both for having me. Great time.
If people want to find you, where can they find you, follow you?
You can definitely find me on Twitter. I spend a lot of time there trying to interject my opinions at the Mitchipedia.
J Mike, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at JMike101.
As for me, you can find me at Case Aiken. You can find the podcast at Men of Steel Pod. It turns out there's now a new Men of Steel 14. I saw because like I still have some like links up that have our old Twitter handle.
Who's trying to steal
I
our
was
stuff?
like, oh yeah. But whatever. We're Men of Steel Pod now, guys. You can find it on Twitter at Men of Steel Pod. You can find more episodes of this show and tons of other great shows at certainpov.com, where you can find a link to our Discord server. We have so much stuff going on the Discord server, sneak peeks at stuff, great conversations. There's a lot of nerds there, so if you are a nerd for anything, there is going to be someone there who shares your nerddom. So check it out. I feel like nerds of a feather should flock together, and this is a great place to take flight. Mm-hmm. Keeping that metaphor going. But then you should also be checking out tons of great shows. I'm going to throw out one that is a perfect tie-in for who our guest is. We have recently relaunched United States of Women on the network. So check that out. It used to be part of Geek Elite Media, but the show is living on. Jessica and Elizabeth are doing a great job chronicling important women state by state as they join the union, and it's really cool. The first 2 seasons are out as of us recording it right now. The second 2 will probably be out by the time this actually hits the air. So, so check that out. And new episodes are starting in May, so very likely we're going to be at that point by the time this episode drops. But it's a great show with lots of historic information that's awesome to check out, and it's a great framing device of looking state by state in terms of order. I think that makes it really easy to go on what can be a very daunting task, which is like, how do you respect the underappreciated people in history? And it's like, well, what's the framing device for that? And the show's great for that. And Mitch, you're the editor for that.
Yeah. And yeah, it's, you know what? There's lots of things that I've learned just from listening and editing the podcast. So it's great.
Yeah. So great show. Check that out. It's at certainpov.com. And until next time, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are J. Mike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon.
We just finished brunch with our parents, but we had it here, so I didn't have to go anywhere.
Nice. Yeah, originally it was supposed to be a trip because my parents have a beach house in Delaware, and they were like, we'll all go out to the beach for Easter. I'm like, I can't take off a week, and because like the Wi-Fi is terrible there, so I can't actually do any work if I'm out there. And it's a 2.5 hour drive, so it's like it's just long enough that it's not like I can just like pop over there for the evening and then like come back like in the afternoon the following day. Like it feels like too much of a trip.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it. My parents are like, have we failed you as a Christian? I'm like, I can't right now.
We have failed.
Hey there, Screen Beans. Have you heard about Screen Snark?
Rachel, this is an ad break. They aren't screen beans until they listen to the show.
Fine. Potential Screen Beans. You like movies and TV shows, right?
I mean, who doesn't? Screen Snark is a casual conversation about the movies and television shows that are shaping us as we live our everyday lives.
That's right, Matt. We have a chat with at least one incredible guest every episode, hailing from all walks. We've interviewed chefs,
Writers, costumers, musicians,
yoga teachers, comedians, burlesque dancers,
folks in the film and TV industry,
and more.
We'd be delighted for you to join us every other Monday on the Certain POV Podcast Network.
Or wherever you get your podcasts, fresh and tasty off the presses.
What? That's not.
Can I call them Screen Beans now?
Fine.
Screen Beans.
So tune in and we'll see you at the movies or on a couch somewhere.
'Cause you're a whole Screen Beans now.
She will be mine.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.